Coyle with the California Department of Water Resources. As usual, I'll start with our normal reservoir statistics. So we're 10 o'clock this morning. We were 863 feet on the elevation of the lake. We have inflows fluctuating quite a bit over the past couple days. They've been down around 22, 2600 or 1,000 CFS. Then this morning they're up around 40,000 CFS. You know, that's obviously due to the wet weather that we're having. Maybe as a note on that point right there is overnight we broke the over 100-year record for the 8-station index, which is, you know, a number of different monitoring sites in Northern California. In my opinion, it's one of the most important watersheds for the state and the state's water supply. So we just hit, as I recall, 89.7 inches versus the record, long-held record, which was back in 1982-83 of 88.5. With that being said, we have more weather coming. We'll talk about that in just a second. Our Hyatt release right now is 13,000, and there's no current discharge over the spillway, and the total river flow is at 13,000. And we'll talk a little bit more about Hyatt or the spill in just a second. Our debris removal, of course, continues at an amazing rate. We obviously made a huge dent in 1.7 million cubic yards of material. So we're up to 1.58 million cubic yards. So we're getting towards the end of that. We're going to stay on the debris removal until we can get as much as we can. Of course, the land-based operations have been very, very efficient. Our stockpiles, spoil sites are all having the capacity to meet our needs there. And so we still have some of that material down in the diversion pool, and that's going to take a little bit longer to remove that material to get that channel back to depth. And obviously, with those waterborne operations are a little bit slower, but very important as we move through the response and recovery part of this process. Just quick update on what we're looking at for the 10-day forecast for the Feather River Basin. We're looking at a couple storms. The models this time of year do fluctuate as you transition from wet weather to more of the dry weather. We do seem to be experiencing a number of kind of more typical winter type storms, but they are smaller, shorter in duration, but we do see these things spinning through. I think we have 2 more events coming. The snow level is still about between 6,000 and 4,000, so we continue to get snow in the watershed. I think we've said before, I think we got enough snow, got enough water, but that being said, that does factor into some of our activities that we're doing here as part of our emergency response to manage inflows and outflows from the reservoir. So what we're going to talk a little bit about today, as that we have on our chart, is we're going to open the spillway tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Again, that's part of managing those inflows and outflows. We're going to start at 35,000 CFS. This spill we're going to run for a while. Again, that's a little lower than we've done before. There's a number of reasons for that. One of which is we want to minimize the erosion in that channel from the spillway, the upper chute of the spillway down through that channel on the looking up the chute on the right side. We want to minimize any erosion in that area and also minimize erosion in and around the very end of the chute. So we're looking at 35,000 CFS. We're going to carry that 10 to 14 days. So where we start, or we're going to start tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Where we end is going to be kind of related to 835, 832 foot elevation. Again, we're going to build that flood storage within the reservoir to anticipate that additional snow melt and these storms that keep coming at us. The graphic that we have here takes us out through the 23rd. So this is based on our modeling that we're doing twice a day. This just happens to be the latest model run that we've had here. The black line is where we are forecasting the inflows. In other words, it could be lower, it could be higher. The green line jumps up tomorrow up to 35 and runs steady. That's the release over the spillway. The Hyatt is the purple line that you don't really see too much of. We will be pulling down the Hyatt power plant tomorrow while we kind of switch water sources here. And the idea for that is here in the next 4 to 5 days, we're going to do what we call the shoe fly connection. So a lot of work's been done to put up power poles, run the cables, and so we can have a more robust and safer connection for the powerhouse to the grid. So as we've talked about in the past, we need that connection to the grid to make sure that we can move water through the powerhouse. So during the next 4 or 5 days, we're going to make that physical tie from those new power lines, tower system, into the transformer yard there at Hyatt. So I think most of our air operations are over, so hopefully that's all land-based at this point. I haven't confirmed that this morning, but the idea there, of course, is complete that process. And then while the spill is up and the power plant's down, they're going to be continuing their kind of robust maintenance to make sure that we have this plant up and going. When we switch back to coming off the spill, we'll talk more about that and have a press briefing when we come off the spill. Again, we learned a lot last time, worked really well with a staging of different releases from different water bodies in the area so that we can really minimize the impact below the diversion structure into levees, etc., downstream. But when we do that, then the Hyatt powerhouse will come back up to about half of its capacity. So we're modeling, forecasting 6,000 CFS. So that will only be half of the units. So on April 22nd, we're going to stop using one of the penstocks or one of the tunnels that feeds 3 of the powerhouses. And that'll be out actually for about 4 to 5 weeks. The idea behind that is to go in and do some major assessments, adjustments, kind of tune up the system for a much longer run this summer when we want to make sure that everything's operating at full capacity as we get to a point sometime late May or beginning of June when we actually turn the spillway off and we start construction. So I just want to make sure that, as we've said before, we are operating the Hyatt powerhouse, the spillway, the diversion pool, the thermolato afterbay, all as a system. And so we'll try to push that information out just so people are aware when we do make those kind of changes. But when we're doing major things like using the spillway or reducing or stopping the use of the spillway, then we'll have briefings like this today. From our emergency response side of things, we're kind of spinning that effort down as we get to towards the end of the debris removal. Again, we'll continue to work that. Some of that work may be transitioned over to our recovery team. A lot of benches or some of the slopes in and around the spillway and downstream have been cut back. So some of that work has been done in anticipation of this spill to, again, minimize the erosion, but also kind of set up for the future recovery activities. Some more of that work will continue as part of the emergency response, and then it's all comes down to reservoir operations. Again, monitoring twice a day, making sure the various teams and monitoring groups are aware of those models, and if necessary, if we see a change, then we need to kind of push that information out to you and the public so that everybody understands what's happening and why. In a minute, we'll talk about some of the recovery activities. Let's see, I talked about the 22nd, which will be, again, we'll pull up Hyatt Powerhouse again at that time to half of its capacity. Again, we won't be planning to use the other penstock because that'll be closed off for 4 to 5 weeks. And then when that comes back on, we'll push that information out. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeannie Cuddle, talk a little bit about our recovery efforts.
Thank you, Director Croyle. My name is Jeannie Cuddle, and I'm the Incident Command for Recovery. And I'm going to give you a quick update on a few of the items that we are working on related to the recovery activities. The first I want to address is the forensics team. Just as a reminder, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission directed DWR in a letter in February 13th to perform a forensic analysis to determine the cause of the chute failure and to ascertain whether or not the failure mode could occur again. So FERC mandated that this forensics team was fully independent and had not previously worked on any part of Oroville facilities. We sought the assistance of the USSD, the United States Society on Dams, as well as the Association of State Dam Safety Officials, two nationally known dam safety organizations, to put together that team for us. So that team has been put together, and they have actually been on site today doing an inspection, and will be in Sacramento tomorrow looking through records and files. My second topic, the Spillways construction contract update. So last week, I mentioned that we had a contract out. We were advertising. We will open bids for that contract. The current plan is Saturday, this Saturday the 15th. And we will then be issuing the notice to begin work estimated on Monday the 17th. So let me address, once that notice to begin work occurs on the 17th, there's a number of things that that contractor will do. Now, as a reminder, the spillway will be in operation next week, so we don't expect them to actually start work in the actual spillway proper. There is plenty of other work that they will be doing. For one, they'll be providing submittals and detailed schedules. They'll be doing mobilization of equipment. They'll be developing access areas and staging areas and material processing areas. They will start the material processing. They will establish material transport, so conveyors, belts, cranes, and haul routes. They will set up the construction offices and trailers, establishing site security, and then at that point they'll be prepared for when the spillway stops spilling for this season, and they'll get to work on all the remediation activities that we mentioned last week. At this point, we will wait to provide more information on when the schedule and what activities will be happening. Once we get a contractor on board and they provide that schedule, we'll have a much better idea of the work activities and their sequencing. At the time between spills, there will be additional work going on in the spillway. So, as Bill mentioned, the spillway is expected to operate for a couple of weeks. Once that's over, we will continue to do additional geotechnical exploration on the spillway chute. We'll be doing and continue to do dredging down below, tied in with the debris removal. The other contract that we put out a couple weeks ago for Burma Road access is about 35% complete to date. The completion date for that contract is May 8th, and we expect Tykert, the contractor, to be complete by then. Part of that also includes left slope stabilization and excavation. And then also some additional material and aggregate processing, which will tie into the RCC and structural concrete we'll be doing on both facilities. So with that, that's kind of my summary of recovery activities.
Great, thanks, Jeannie. See, I want to switch over to your notes and my notes. Okay, great. Yep, got it. Okay. So one of the things I want to make sure we talk about, we've talked a little bit more about this over the last couple meetings, but it is a very, very important part of how we move forward, and that's our community outreach. And so we've been working on our communications plan, refining that, getting some input from local leaders, both state and federal representatives, some special interest groups. Some of those meetings, work various kind of strike teams or groups that have already been in place have been engaged. One of the things that we talked about is the meeting coming up on April 27th at the Butte County Fairgrounds in Gridley. And so that means we thought open house format. And so the idea is to come in and not talk just to DWR, but to talk to our other partner agencies on all the various questions that you might have. It's important to recognize that in this environment, we've been working kind of focused from an emergency management standpoint on unified command, but there's a lot of other agencies that are in a support role that have an important role as we work to make sure that we're communicating with you, the media, and with the public on the concerns, the status, the various activities, and what is coming in the future. There's a number of other meetings that are being planned. Right now we're looking at 6 meetings. Those dates and the specific locations haven't been identified yet, but here within the next day or so I expect to have some, if not all of those set up. But we're in the near term, we're focusing on more meetings in Oroville, Marysville, and Yuba City. So 2 different meetings in that general area, Chico and Sacramento. I also want to make sure that if there's a need or a want, that we will be working with our key partners, including the Sheriff's Department through Sheriff Honey, to make sure that we're taking advantage of those that are interested and that have questions, concerns, ideas, comments, and making sure that we're collecting and processing that information in the process. So it's key that we want to bring you, as I said before, we want to bring you along for the ride. This is important for this community. It's actually important for California. It's actually looking at it from a national, international standpoint. So it's a huge opportunity to show what we're all working through together, but also to showcase, I think, some of what I call the firsts. The first and number. Some of the firsts were a little difficult, but we have also, I think, a first to change how we would all work together at the local, state, and federal level to address, in this case, a pretty significant impact to this community. One thing I want to bring up is, for some that rely on the water supply from Lake Oroville, that's the key to making sure that we have an operational Hyatt power plant through the summer. That's been a major focus of us from day one, and I can't say enough about, I know our staff and the contractors that it worked very, very hard 24/7 to maintain the flood proofing on that facility, and as well as the power lines so that we have access to that water throughout the year. So that's secured our water supply through this emergency, so we can make decisions on how much water we can use and when it can be used. So right now the state water project allocation is set at 60%. We haven't changed that for a number of months. We do recognize that this is the wettest year on record in this watershed. We also have a challenge with one of our major storage facilities on how we work on the water supply issue. So we'll be working through that in the coming days and weeks. We won't be able to make a final call on the allocation till a number of weeks from now, when we make sure we understand the operation of the reservoir as it relates to the emergency, but also the emergency recovery. And so that operational plan is being developed. We got to do that in concert with our regulatory agencies. At the same time, I want to make sure that we have been able to move a lot of water down through the system. We have the benefit of probably a major snow melt still to come, and it will last quite a while through the summer. So that's all being factored in to our allocation. So I'll be getting a briefing on that tomorrow. We hope that we can move that allocation up, but again, there's a number of other factors that we need to consider before we make the final allocation. That might be later in beginning of May or early June. So Jeannie talked a little bit about the forensics team. There's been lots of discussion about the Board of Consultants report. One of the things that we've said here in the past is that we were going to work with Sheriff Honey on looking at these reports. That process has started today, and so I think that'll be an ongoing process. We do want to push this information as much as we can out to the public. So how we do that, the format we do it is all part of our conversation that we've been having over a number of weeks, but more importantly here today, we've started that process with the sheriff. And so with that, Sheriff, would you like to sing? Are we good? Okay. Okay, very good. And so I think we're still in that process. Again, we'll be setting up additional time as soon as possible to complete that process so we can work through this. We are committed to pushing as much information as we possibly can out. Again, as I said, whether it's through briefings like this, community meetings, small group meetings, to make sure that we all understand what happened, which is going to take a while to figure out as the forensics team is on site here today and doing their homework. That may be some time before we see all that on what happened or why it happened, but I think also as we move through this and pushing our information out like we are today on the status, the design, what we know, the information that we can share with regard to the construction, the schedule, and costs and things like that. So with that, I'll be happy to answer some questions.
Hey, Bill, so last time we were here, I think you described the repair plan as approximately 60%. The design of it about 60% done. What's changed in the last week or so?
Oh shoot, I don't know, Jeannie? Jeannie, the microphone. Welcome to the microphone.
The Board of Consultants met earlier this week, and we're still going through each of the different structural design calculations, looking at the geology, looking at the geotechnical, and the hydrology. So each iteration and each week we're addressing a next set of technical issues, providing the board an opportunity to review and comment, and then also getting the buy-off of the Division of Safety of Dams and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So each week we are contributing to the design and adding more detail, and ultimately when the construction contract is let, we will provide that to the contractor. Again, we have a little bit of time because the spillway won't be it won't be done being used until probably the latter part of May is the current estimate. But then again, it's going to be dependent on the hydrology coming in.
Okay. Thank you, Jeannie. So I'm waiting for another hand, but while I'm waiting for, okay, there we go.
The forensics report you're talking about, do you have a sort of loose time frame for when that might be complete and what information from that at this point would be publicly releasable?
Our goal is to release the forensics report. I think we all want to know, the industry wants to know. I'm not aware of any boundaries or limitations that have been put on the forensics report. On timing, I can't answer that. Again, they're on site today. They've been up on the spillway this morning. They'll be in Sacramento this morning, as Jeannie said. And so then they have to do their due diligence, and they may need another visit or certainly access to all the records and records from other agencies as well.
What specifically is it about the project that causes you to delay a decision on raising the 60%? Is construction just physically in the way of sending more water? And is this a long-term issue?
No, this is an iterative process. We actually move pretty fast, pushing. Normally you wouldn't push out a 60% to a contractor for design, but we need to engage them so that we can also better understand, here's what we need to do. We're still in the process of finalizing that design, being vetted through our two regulatory agencies, and then our third party, the BOC, to engage that, right? But there's always opportunities for value-added engineering. They may come up with a better idea on how to do it. We know what we want to do, and we got to get that approved and vetted through that process. But if they have a better way on how to do it, hopefully, we can save some time and some money, and then those are the kind of things that can help as we go through this process. I'm looking at Jeannie to make sure that if I want to make sure I haven't misspoke, and then also, so.
Yeah, I was talking about the allocation.
I'm sorry. I'm into design. You got to stop me, okay? So if I'm going down there, I want to get this spillway done, I guess. Okay, so the 60% allocation. So again, we've moved a lot of water south of Delta with our partners there at San Luis Reservoir. Our contractors have been able to take almost all of the water that we can push out the delta. We've secured the water supply here for the Northern California, for those senior water right holders that come on the Feather River. So then it comes down to make sure that the overall demands are met. We don't want to commit to an allocation we can't meet. So it's going to come down to how much water are we going to keep when we start construction, or maybe how low the reservoir has to be before we go into next November. And so that's part of our operational plan. So we know what we want to do. That's factoring in our current hydrology. And then in the end, we have to make sure our regulatory agencies, being DSOD, the Division of Safety of Dams, and FERC, are in agreement with our operational plan.
Is this a potential issue years down the road?
I don't think this is an issue. When we get the spillway fully operational, we should be able to get back to our normal, using our flood curves. This time of year, as the wetting index goes up, then we can store more water with anticipation of the allocation and the need. So it's a good question. Sorry that I went down the wrong path on you there.
Yeah, back to the other 60% question.
Okay.
You kind of alluded to this a moment ago. I'm still trying to get my head around how unusual, I guess it is, to be putting out executing contract as early as Monday, and yet, work won't start for several weeks, and the design is still going to be taking shape. Does that create the potential for problems where you find out the contractor thought they were doing one thing and you thought they were going to do something else? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I know what you mean, but I think the key here is that's why, again, early on, I start messaging a project that maybe makes or takes normally 2 or 3 years to do, and where you have a 30-day or 60-day review at another agency, is they're in the room. So we need hours and days for review and approvals versus weeks and months and years. And so the idea here, by design, we've included all of the people that need to be involved in this design, kind of what I call in the room. They're not maybe like in the room, but they're right there a room away. And the idea here is to be able to push this out, maybe without all the final answers on our design, we can engage our regulatory agencies and the BOC on this process, but we can get started. So we're not waiting a couple weeks to get all this stuff done, because work is already being done on the recovery effort. So the major work will start, again, by mobbing. While they're doing that, then we'll finalize those specifications and push that out. And so the reason, the primary reason comes down to public safety. It's a lot easier on everyone, all of you included, to take the 2 or 3 years to do this. But I don't have 2 or 3 years, I got some months. And I got to make sure that we put a spillway back into place. And so I can't wait for 100% to design to make sure we got everything covered, because there are a number of key things that we can get going on, like the staging areas, making sure we secure all the resources, the concrete, everything that we need, we can get to show on site. We kind of know what we need to do. This isn't a different kind of construction process. These are normal materials, normal construction, methods. It's just in a broken spillway.
So the fact that you think construction might begin late May, early June, I think that implies you're probably going to use the spillway at least one more time?
Yes. At the moment, based on the hydrology, we're going to need the spillway one more time. So when that is, kind of depends on how much more rain we get. If we get warm rain, cool rain, snow, and just how the watersheds kind of respond. So if it stays cool, that's a slow melt, then that changes things up. Whether if it all of a sudden gets really hot and flashy, then we have a big snow melt. So again, the big snow melt's coming. It's we're ramping up. We've seen some of the hydrographs have changed. Like we have some weather. The weather's on the cooler side for typically, but usually 1st of May we should be straight into the snow melt. So channel 3. Yeah.
Can you just talk about the decision to deny access to certain public records and kind of how you reconcile that with these open houses? Surely this will come up.
We're going through the process to vet out those documents that have been deemed CEII. So critical energy, electrical infrastructure information. So that's the process that we're going through. Not all the information in those reports shouldn't be maintained confidential. We're going through our vetting process, and I appreciate the sheriff's willingness to jump in the middle of this. We've also engaged Cal OES Critical Infrastructure from the state infrastructure side, and from there we're working through with the Department of Homeland Security. So part of that is making sure that what we're looking at deeming CII is and should be. And so the other information in those reports we're committed to push out through these different venues and other forms, and that's part of the dialogue that we'll be having with the sheriff. We've had it with some elected officials, so that we can make sure that the information that's appropriate to push out, we'll push out. So we want to do that as soon as possible. Again, I appreciate the sheriff's time to come and meet with us for a couple hours today to work through that, so that we're all in the know, we understand the limitations. This is not just an Oroville issue. This is an important issue for all the dams and other critical infrastructure in the nation. And so we need to make sure that we're following the criteria, the guidelines that are set up by FERC. We have the benefit of a subject matter expert that was involved in the national panel a number of years ago to set all this stuff up. And so having him as counsel on this is super important. But in the end, I think the partnership we have with Butte County Sheriff is critical to working through and vetting this all out so that we can make sure that we can push out the information that we need to push out and do it as fast as we can.
So are you making the call on that? Is that my understanding?
We're seeking his input.
Okay.
Yeah, so in the end, I'm the owner of the dam. I myself, not the owner of the dam, the Department of Water Resources is the owner of the dam. And so in the end, I'm responsible for the security of this dam. I being the Department of Water Resources. And so in the end, that's what FERC is looking for me to make that call. And so in this case, I'm seeking counsel on the body of the work that's being generated by the BOC. Okay?
You said you were going to get, if I understood correctly, into one of the tunnels of the high power plant during the shutoff period. Can you tell us specifically what you're looking for over there?
Well, we get into, well, we're going to stop the flow or plug the flow on one of the penstocks. The penstock is the tunnel that feeds 3 of the turbines, and so that'll be part of the maintenance activities that they go in, assess the condition of the 2 operational turbines, do some preparatory work for the replacement of turbine 1, so they can get that all ready for later this fall. So that I understand that work is scheduled for later, kind of early mid-fall, so then we can get that turbine 1 back and going right.
So it's the turbine, it's not the tunnel itself?
I think when they shut that, as I understand it, when they close off the penstock, then everything gets inspected. If there's any repairs that need to be made, they make them as a normal course of business.
Will that process happen to all the tunnels, one after the other, or is it just the one that you're...
Okay, there's 2 tunnels, and I understand it for this year. There's only 1 tunnel that'll be pulled down. And again, that's preparing for the reinstallation of turbine 1, and then all the operational maintenance. So we want to make sure 2 and 3 are ready to go for the summer. So by June 1, we'll have a total of 5 turbines available. Again, some of that preparatory work for turbine 1 later in the year, but also we'll have access to both of the low flow river valves if we need them.
Yeah, one just quick follow-up. If you talk about the CII status, you said not all the information in those reports should be maintained confidential. Does that imply that like redacted versions of some of these reports could come out?
Yeah, that's part of our conversation that we're having right now is what is that form? So that is one of the options. Okay? Okay.